Hey, namaste, hello and a very warm welcome to UPSC for everyone. My name is Abhinav and in this video we'll be discussing selected topics from the Hindu and Indian Express for the date 13th of October 2020. Now in this video we'll be discussing the following topics. Government moves to spur demand. So this is about the latest sort of mini stimulus that the finance minister has announced. So we'll discuss this. Then American duo win economics Nobel. So we'll discuss about this Nobel Prize and also we'll be discussing about winner's curse. Sri Lanka in talks to secure 500 million in Chinese loans. So Sri Lanka is seeking more loans. We'll also see the geostrategic importance of Sri Lanka in the light of current events. EU to sanction Russia over Navalny. So Navalny is a prominent anti-Putin figure from Russia. He was poisoned with Novichok nerve agent. So EU is going to now sanction Russia over this. This sanction is led by France and Germany. We'll see what this news is about. Then climate change to blame for doubling of disasters. So this is a report by the UN and it says in the past 20 years, the disasters that have happened, the natural disasters, their rate has increased in comparison to the previous 20 years because of climate change. Antimicrobe drug can fight coronavirus, say scientists. So this report is from scientists from Hong Kong and they have found the use of an existing drug to combat coronavirus. So we'll see what the drug is. Delhi Male Inc. 400 million pact for connectivity. So this is about a project called the Greater Male Connectivity Project. So we'll see what that project is and how Delhi is contributing to that. Then editorials, all three from the Hindu today. Gene editing, the good first and then the worries. So this is about the Nobel in chemistry. We'll see again something about that prize, about gene editing and the concerns about it and also the policy framework in India to deal with gene editing. Then towards cleaner air in Delhi. Now this is specific to Delhi, but the problem is bigger one, the problem of pollution. So there are some good steps. The author gives us a three-pronged solution to this problem of, so we look at those problems. There are also examples from international cities. So this is going to be a good read. Then the tyranny of TRPs. Now this article is by an IAS officer and he has given some interesting facts about the television industry in India. And he has also pointed out some problems with the barometers. So we'll see what he's saying. Again, this is a good editorial. So these are all the topics we'll be discussing. Now to get the PDFs of these topics, you can join us on our Telegram page. This is how our Telegram page looks like. And also, if you like our video, subscribe, press the bell icon and give us a thumbs up, right? And please join us on Telegram so that you can get PDFs of all these video lectures. So without much delay, let's get started. Climate change to blame for doubling of disasters. So this is a report by UN, the human cost of disasters 2000 to 2019. So it says that in these 20 years, because of climate change, the intensity and the damage caused by these disasters has doubled. Now, let us see what this report is saying. The UN office said in a new report entitled The Human Cost of Disasters 2000 to 2019, climate change is largely to blame for near doubling of natural disasters in the past 20 years. The UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction said 7,348 major disaster events had occurred between 2000 and 2019, claiming 1.23 million lives and affecting 4.2 billion people, costing the global economy some 2.97 trillion. So almost 3 trillion loss. The figure far outstrips the 4.212 major natural disasters between 1980 and 1999. The sharp increase was largely attributed to a rise in climate-related disasters, including extreme weather events like floods, droughts, and storms. And extreme heat is proving especially deadly. And if you remember, we also discussed that how the forest fires are also increasing because of climate change, because of extreme heat, the fire climate conditions. We discussed some particular conditions, low humidity, high heat, then high amount of biomass to be burned. So these conditions are exaggerating and that is why the world is seeing more and more disasters, including the forest fires, right? Towards cleaner air in Delhi. Now this editorial talks about the pollution problem in Delhi. This is from the Hindu. So we'll be discussing the background, that what has happened recently, then the air pollution level before COVID-19, the state of PM 2.5 and PM 10. Then he gives a solution and the solutions are a three-pronged strategy, that is controlling emissions, reducing private vehicles and increasing electric vehicles. And he also gives some examples from international cities and countries. So let us begin this editorial. So air pollution has returned to pre-COVID levels and the Delhi government has launched an anti-pollution campaign. Now this is based on cutting the deadly smoke from thermal plants, brick kilns in the NCR, as well as chemical treatment of stubble burning. We have discussed this already. Pusa, antimicrobial tablets, right? Now Delhi's long-term solution will depend on abating emissions from transportation. Now this is major cause because 20 to 40% of PM 2.5 comes from transportation only, including the trucks and lorries. This agenda could cut air pollution by about 1/4 to 1/3 by 2025, and it is expected to extend people's lives by 2 to 3 years. Now, air pollution before COVID-19, the PM matter 2.5 and 10, it exceeded national standards and the more stringent WHO limits. Delhi's toxic air contains high doses of sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxide, and the lack of wind worsens the pollutant concentration. We have discussed all of this, that there is reversal of monsoon winds. So the reversal of monsoon winds, and that is coupled with the strengthening of the westerlies. So that creates a unique meteorological condition plus the conditions of temperature inversion, and that leads to concentration of pollution over Delhi. Now Delhi needs a 65% reduction to meet the national standards for PM 2.5, and the vehicles including trucks and two-wheelers contribute to 20 to 40%. I've already told you, to PM 2.5. Now solutions, three-pronged solution. So number one is controlling emission. So for that you need stricter enforcement of emission norms and willingness to impose tougher penalties. For example, for Beijing's experience, two-wheelers, three-wheelers were as important as cars and lorries. So there were stringent checks on all of them, and Bangkok, what it did, it ramped up inspection and maintenance to cut emissions. So the first order of business is to implement the national standards. He gives an example that emission testing in Delhi is very low, only about 25%. Then number two is about strengthening public transportation so that you can reduce private vehicles. And he gives examples of good BRT systems from Mexico City, Bogota, Istanbul, Johannesburg, where they made sizable investment, but that was offset by benefits and the financing actually paid off. And Delhi also has its own experience with BRT, so that can be ramped up. Plus the Supreme Court's ruling to increase Delhi's bus fleet and aligning it with metro should be seriously implemented. The odd even scheme, he says that could help, but it should reduce exemptions and allow a longer implementation period, and it should be complemented with other measures. Now the third is a longer term solution, that is the electric vehicles. So Delhi government has already had a policy that by 2024, 1/4 of the vehicles that are registered in Delhi, they should be electric vehicles. So it is a 3-year policy, right? Now, how can you promote them? By giving purchasing incentives, scrappage benefits on older vehicles, loans at favorable interest, and waiver of road taxes. So these are some of the ways of promoting EVs, and India is trying to promote EVs in a big way. Now, the solution also has to be multi-sectoral, because transportation solutions, they are just one part. There is also abatement from other sources like industry and agriculture. And Delhi's own actions won't count for nothing if you do not have cooperation with neighboring states, because pollution is not a localized problem, rather it is a more generalized and globalized problem. Then you also need to have coordination and transparency in the policies and among different implementing agencies, including the central, state and local governments. And there should be increased citizen partnership, and the role of media is also vital for sharing the message and for using data such as those from CPCB and to bring out the lacunae in the system. So these are the solutions that he has given. Now this is specific to Delhi, but this can be applied to any city in the world, right? Tyranny of TRPs. Now this is a very good editorial again from the Hindu, and this is written by an IAS officer. So this editorial tells us something more about the TRPs, and the most important point is that it gives us some good figures about the TV industry in India, and these are the figures that you can use in your answer writing, right? And he also gives us a brief about the unscientific barometers. He also tells us that we need to have innovation. For example, Netflix, YouTube, they all have their own algorithm. They know what we watch and what we like to watch and what we don't like to watch. So they give suggested content, right? So India could also evolve such a system which is securely connected to the net. The agencies could get a better feel of what people are actually watching, right? And then that is why he says that there is a need for innovation in India. And then he also talks about the way forward. So let us look at it. So first of all, he tells that in India, nobody wants to be regulated. True. The judges believe that they can self-regulate because they struck down the NJAC. The media believes that it can self-regulate, especially the television media. Even the print media is self-regulated. Then energy regulators are also retired civil servants. They don't have guts to take tough decisions, right? So there is not much of regulation in India. Major sectors don't want to be regulated from above. Then the staggering numbers for TV industry. Now this is important. Today, TV is perhaps the single biggest window of entry into any home for any business. About 760 million to 800 million individuals view TV in India per week, and they roughly spend about 3.45 hours of watching TV per day. So that is why our economy is not doing that well, right? About 550 million individuals tune into TV daily. And TV penetration in rural India is about 52% and urban India is about 87%. DTH 70 to 80 million households, cable 60 million, and terrestrial about 10 to 20 million. The industry has more than 800 channels of various genres, and the total revenue is about 66,000 crore. Some say 80,000 crore, right? So these figures can be different for different sources. And about 40% is attributed to advertising and 60% to distribution and subscription services. Now the total advertising market in India is about 10 billion to 12 billion dollar, of which digital advertising is about 2 billion. So very, very important figures. And they tell you about the kind of time people are wasting watching TV. And more importantly, if you club that with OTT platforms like Netflix, then probably the figure would be much, much higher. So rather than blaming the government for the bad state of economy, first especially the youth should see where they are spending their productive time. Now he tells us the barometers are unscientific because for only 44,000 households, you distribute digital advertising goodies worth 25,000 crore. So for example, only 22,000 barometers are used for 44,000 households. So per barometer is worth 1 crore of advertising. And it is not statistically significant to explain the TV viewing universe of 200 million households. Very true. Then it needs innovation. We need to manufacture barometers connected with the internet securely, which not only give us channel-wise, but also program-wise and hour-wise data. For example, Netflix and YouTube, they know not only what you watched, how long you watched, what else you may like, and what you may ignore. So they have sophisticated AIs. So India could also develop something like that. So he says that why can't India come up with a connected barometers or set of boxes when almost everything is now down to digital zeros and ones and measurable. And if you remember, there was a suggestion from Ministry of INB for implementing digital chips in DTH, but that was struck down, right? Rejected. And I told you probably because of the vested interest groups. Now the way forward. So there are two main agencies in the world, Ofcom of UK and Federal Communications Commission of US. They consist usually of government appointed officials and distinguished members from the corporate world. But in India, we have problem with everything. So we all disagree on what constitutes independent. Even if government of a particular ideology appoints a regulator, it will be almost certainly deemed partisan. So you need to find a middle way, and there should be a broad consensus about forming a regulator which is multi-sectoral and it has multi-stakeholders, so that we can have a smooth way of testing this and there is no financial cheating on the people. American duo win economics Nobel. So these are the two gentlemen. They both teach at Stanford and they got Nobel Prize for their work in the fields of auctions, right? Now they gave some theories, they revived the old theories and they gave new theories which have proved to be revolutionary about how to conduct auctions for even things like radio frequencies, right? Now, we'll also be introduced to a concept here about winner's curse, right? I will explain what is winner's curse. So let's first see. So Paul Milgrom and Robert Wilson honored for their work on commercial auctions, including for goods and services difficult to sell in traditional ways, such as radio frequencies. The duo was honored for improvements to auction theory and inventions to new auction formats. Discoveries have benefited sellers, buyers, and taxpayers. Now, Mr. Wilson, his contribution was developing a theory for auctions with a common value, a value which is uncertain beforehand, but in the end is same for everyone. What it means, I'll just tell you, it is about winner's curse. His work showed why rational bidders tend to bid under their own estimate of the worth due to worries over the winner's curse or winning the auction but paying too much. Mr. Milgrom, also at Stanford, then came up with more general theory of auctions by analyzing bidding strategies in different auction forms. Together, they invented new formats for auctioning of many interrelated objects simultaneously on the behalf of a seller who is motivated by social benefit rather than maximal revenue. Now, important point here is to know what is winner's curse. See, this is more about behavioral economics, and it is a combination of economics and psychology. So what happens? Let us see. So for example, this is an auction for fish, right? Now these cats are bidding. Now every cat would be bidding differently. Some cats would be more optimistic than the others, right? Like we read that rational actors, they would be conservative in their bids because they are uncertain. Under their own worries, they bid lesser than the optimistic ones. Optimistics are less rational. So what happens? See, this is the estimate, right? Now estimates, for some it would be less, some it would be more, right? These are the optimistic ones and these are the rational ones. But the real value would always be close to the mean value. That if you take a mean of all these values, the real value would be somewhat close to the mean value. So what happens? The person who wins the bid, he has actually paid way much more than the actual or the true worth of the object. So this is known as winner's curse. And for pointing this out, they have won a Nobel Prize in economics. So the winner's curse is a tendency for winning bid in an auction to exceed the intrinsic value or true worth of an item. As a result, the largest overestimation of an item's value ends up winning the auction, but the person who wins, he has lost so much of money because of overestimation, right? So this is about the Nobel Prize in economics. Only important concept that you need to know is winner's curse. Gene editing, the good first and then the worries. So this is about the Nobel Prize in chemistry. Again, CRISPR-9, Cas9 gene editing. First, he gives us an idea about that. Then about a shock. I told you that in 2018, a Chinese man, he conducted gene editing on embryos to make them immune to HIV/AIDS, and twin girls were born. So that shocked the entire world. So there was a huge hue and cry about regulation. So WHO formed a panel, and that panel recommended that there should be a registry to register all the human trials, right? Now situation in India. So we'll see what are the rules that regulate the genetically modified organisms and that regulate the gene editing processes. So let us see. So with the chemistry Nobel thrusting CRISPR-9 into limelight, India needs guidelines for gene editing research. The two scientists have pioneered the use of CRISPR, clustered regularly interspaced short palindrome repeats. We have discussed all of this, right? And Cas9, CRISPR associated protein 9, which basically acts like a scissor, which is a gene editing tool. Now, in a short span of 8 years since its discovery, the method has already made a significant impact on biology, medicine, and agriculture. In this editorial, he also tells us about the contributions of other people, but they have not been included in this Nobel. One of the reasons is that in any category, the Nobel Prize can be given to maximum 3 people. That was the will of Alfred Nobel. So probably one of those reasons, but then some names should have been included, and that is somewhat controversial. It is not often that one sees practical applications of scientific findings in such a short time. The only other work with such a quick and revolutionary impact is PCR, polymerase chain reaction, invented by Kary Mullis in 1983. Now the shock, long way to go before realizing the utility of gene editing for therapeutic application, but we cannot be complacent and wait for rogue individual or entity to try it out on humans. And we saw in 2018, Chinese scientist He Jiankui edited genes in human embryos using CRISPR-Cas9 system to produce immunity against HIV/AIDS, subsequently implanted and resulted in birth of twin girls. That became the case of first gene-edited babies in the world. Then WHO panel and registry. So in the aftermath, WHO formed a panel of gene editing experts, and they said that there needs to be a central registry of all human genome editing research to create an open and transparent database of ongoing work. And it called upon WHO to start setting up such a registry immediately. It has not done so till now. Now, what is the situation in India? There are several rules, guidelines, and policies backed by rules for manufacture, use, import, export, and storage of hazardous microorganisms, genetically engineered organisms or cells, 1989, notified under the Environment Protection Act 1986. So I don't think you can remember this name. That you should have an idea that for genetically modified organism, the overarching law is the Environment Protection Act 1986, and under that rules have been notified. Then the Environment Protection Act plus the National Ethical Guidelines for Biomedical Research and Health Research Involving Human Participants 2017, which was given by ICMR, and Biomedical and Health Research Regulation Bill. It implies the regulation for gene editing process. Now, it does not explicitly mention the term gene editing, but it basically checks and regulates gene editing. So there are two things. One is the Environment Protection Act, which is an overarching act, and under this, rules have been notified to regulate genetically modified organisms. Then EPA plus National Ethical Guidelines 2017 plus Biomedical and Health Research Regulation Bill. All three combined, they regulate the gene editing process in India. So this is all about this editorial. Government moves to spur demand. So I'm sorry in advance that this is going to be somewhat boring because this is all factual, nothing to explain there. So hoping to spur fresh demand, about 1 lakh crore in the second half of the year, Union Finance Minister unveiled a mini stimulus of sorts. Incentives are given for government and public sector employees to spend more on consumer durables and services. So basically what they get for LTC, they can use that money to spend on consumer durables, but such durables that attract a 12% GST. And to get that, they'll have to file a bill which is 3 times the ticket cost that they are entitled to get under LTC. For example, if you get tickets worth 10,000 rupees in your LTC, then you'll have to give a bill for 30,000 rupees so that you can claim these 10,000 rupees. That is the scheme, and only on durables which attract 12% GST. So there would also be an increase in GST collection of the government, right? Now, the finance minister said that this condition is there because if we look at the basket of the consumer durables that people spend on, most of the items fall in this 12% GST category. That is why they have mandated this. Plus, they have also decided to give an advance of 10,000 rupees to government and employees, and that would be interest free. So they can return it in easier installments, and the state governments would be getting loans worth rupees 12,000 crore for a 50-year tenure. It is a very long tenure, and that would be for financing capital expenditure. The government itself has raised its borrowing capacity, and it would be spending on infrastructure projects in the country. So what happens when you invest in capital infrastructure projects, then it creates demand in the economy, it generates jobs, it creates demand in the core sector, right? Which is important. That is why they are investing in such sectors. So interest-free loans of 12,000 crore for states for a 50-year tenure. Also enhance the center's own capital expenditure plans by 25,000 crore, right? For construction of road, urban development, water supply, defense infrastructure. So all about infrastructure, and I've told you about its multiplier effect. Use of LTCs. Central government employees and public sector employees have been offered to spend their LTC benefit that expire in March 2021 on consumer goods through a 2-tiered structure involving LTC cash vouchers. Eligible return fare would be given to employees once they provide proof of digital payment of GST registered vendors for 3 times the fare on items that attracted a 12% GST rate. So effectively, this would convert the LTC payout into 33% subsidy for acquiring white goods. Now they would also get a festival allowance of rupees 10,000, right, for all the central government employees, and it is to be utilized by March 31st, 2021 and could be repaid in 10 interest-free installments. This would be given in the form of prepaid RuPay card. So again, they would be promoting government digital payment platform, the RuPay card, right? So these all would spur the people to spend, right? When they spend, they buy. When they buy, that buying and selling, it generates wealth in the economy. It would help creating jobs, and that would give a mini fillip to our economy. That is what their intention is. See, there is a problem because once they give the authority to use LTC for durable expenditure, then what happens? The tourism sector, it will suffer. It is already under so much of stress. Now the expenditure through LTC was important for the tourism sector, but they won't be having the access to that. So everything has its positives and negatives. So here the biggest loser would be the tourism sector in our country. EU to sanction Russia over Navalny. So this is Mr. Navalny. He's a prominent opposition and anti-Putin figure from Russia. So he was poisoned with a nerve agent called Novichok. This is a Soviet era nerve agent which is banned under the OPCW. OPCW is an international organization that checks for chemical weapons, use of chemical weapons, and this organization has also received the Nobel Peace Prize. Now diplomatic sort of a trouble is brewing between Russia and Europe, especially France plus Germany and Russia. So they asked for answers, but they could not get any answers. This person was poisoned. Then he was transferred to Germany. Now he's okay, but they found this nerve agent. So they asked for explanation. Russia never gave any explanation. Of course, Mr. Putin. So now they are talking about putting sanctions on Russia, and the whole EU is going to back them. So this is all about this news. Important word here is the Novichok, which is a nerve agent, and OPCW. Sri Lanka in talks to secure 500 million in Chinese loans. So yesterday also we discussed about Sri Lanka asking for Chinese loans and to prove that those loans are not debt traps, right? And I also told you about the debt diplomacy and how Sri Lanka had to lease out Hambantota port in 2017 for 99 years to China for the loan that Sri Lanka had taken. And interestingly, that port was developed by the Chinese people themselves, right? And I also showed you that picture about string of pearls, the different ports extending from South China Sea to Africa, encircling India. So if China gives this loan, then the overall exposure to Sri Lanka under the urgent financial assistance to deal with the economic impact of the pandemic to Sri Lanka would be over $1 billion. Already Sri Lanka has to pay back $4.5 billion next year to China. That is not going to happen. So Sri Lanka probably will be selling out something else. See, I've told you time and again how China is literally buying out Pakistan, and that is what it does. It traps its partners into debt and then it dictates terms to those partners. Now this country, Sri Lanka, is also becoming important geostrategically. It is already important, but now that Quad is looking for more partners, so it has assumed a new importance. I also told you how a senior US official is going to visit Bangladesh, right? Now another senior official, the Secretary of State of US, will be visiting Sri Lanka to have talks with them, and Quad is trying to include these Indian Ocean countries, littoral states, to the Quad initiative, right? So theater of geopolitics, US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is expected to visit Sri Lanka, pointing to the heightened geopolitical interest. Now Quad will watch closely because of the recent developments. What happened was that last month Sri Lanka ordered the termination of a 1.5 billion Japanese funded light rail project on the grounds that it is not cost effective solution, and there were also environmental concerns. Now the main reason was the Chinese involvement. The second, again because of pressure from China, Sri Lanka cancelled the East Container Terminal in Colombo that India and Japan had agreed to jointly develop with Sri Lanka, because they said that there were troubles as workers were opposing the foreign involvement in national assets. But China is a foreign country and it has been involved in so many national assets of Sri Lanka. So these are all just excuses. Basically, China is pulling the strings in Sri Lanka to push out India, Japan and other Quad countries out of Sri Lanka. So let's see what happens in future. Delhi Malé Inc. 400 million pact for connectivity. So Malé is the capital of Maldives. So they have signed a pact for $400 million. And that project is called Greater Malé Connectivity Project. I'll just tell you what it is all about. And this project is a key pledge of President Ibrahim Solih. India has also pledged to grant 100 million for the initiative. The grant and line of credit come in addition to the previous LOC of 800 million, among India's greatest loan extended in the region. Now, first of all, a grant is something which is not to be paid back, right? But a line of credit is kind of a loan. And generally what happens in a line of credit, for example, if India gives line of credit to some country, then that country would be giving preference to Indian companies for the projects under this line of credit, right? So India is giving line of credit as well as grant to Maldives for that project. Project is called Greater Malé Connectivity Project. Now, what is this project? Greater Malé Connectivity Project. It will consist of a number of bridges, causeways to connect Malé to Vilingili, Thilafushi and Gulihifau islands that span 6.7 kilometers. First, let me show you a map. So see, this is where Maldives is, and it is a group of atolls. Atolls are basically coral islands of ring shape. So these are all the atolls and they together constitute the country known as Maldives, right? Now this is the capital Malé, and this is the Greater Malé Connectivity Project connecting these islands. This is 6.7 kilometer corridor and this will connect these islands to Malé. Now what it will do, it will decrease the pressure on Malé because it is a limited space. And like a capital, for example, if you look at capital or a major city, there is so much population there, and with population comes problems. So to ease the pressure of population, they have created this bridge so that people can stay in these places and they can come to Malé for work and then go back. Right? Some other Indian projects in this region are Aviation Hub Promotion, Direct Cargo Levy, and the ones in red are Chinese projects. Now let's get back to it. So it would ease much of the pressure from the main capital island of Malé for commercial and residential purposes. When completed, the project would render the Chinese-built Sina-Malé Friendship Bridge connecting Malé to two other islands, thus far the most visible infrastructure project in the islands, useless because this would be more important. At present, India-assisted projects in the region include like water and sewage, reclamation, port, airport, I just showed you, hospital and cricket stadium in Malé. So this is about the Greater Malé Connectivity Project. Antimicrobe drug can fight coronavirus, say scientists. So this is a report by scientists in Hong Kong. They announced that an affordable antimicrobial drug to treat stomach ulcers and bacterial infections has shown promise in combating the coronavirus in animals. Now the drug is called the ranitidine bismuth citrate, and it proved to be a potent anti-SARS-CoV-2 agent. Now antidyne bismuth citrate is a metallodrug. Metallodrug is a class of drug which contains metals, right? So what are metallodrugs? They are compounds containing metal and are more commonly used against bacteria. So folks, thank you for watching. That is all for this video. I hope this was helpful. If you like our videos, please subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon so that you don't miss out on any new videos that we post. Also, if you liked our video, please give us a thumbs up. And please do connect with us on our Instagram page, UPSC for Everyone. So see you next time. Till then, stay happy, stay safe, and have a great day. Namaste and Jai Hind.